celebrated director Sir Alan Parker has died at the age of 76, his spokesperson has confirmed. The filmmaker oversaw hits including Bugsy Malone, Evita, Angel Heart and Angela's Ashes. Announcing the sad news on behalf of his family, a spokeswoman said Sir Alan died on Friday morning, following a lengthy illness. Tributes soon began pouring in online, with fellow director David Putnam saying, "Alan was my oldest and closest friend, I was always in awe of his talent. My life and those of many others who loved and respected him will never be the same again." The awakening director Nick Murphy described Sir Alan as a huge talent, tweeting, "Alan Parker made so many wonderful movies. Just wonderful. A huge talent, as I'm sure you know."
So, in terms of your career, both where you were at then and what has kind of come since, Angel Heart's a bit of a departure for you, really, isn't it? In terms of the genre and the sort of, I guess, sort of the macabre element to it.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I can't. What did I do before? I can't remember.
What films you made before, or directly before?
What was before? Birdie.
Yeah, I guess anybody know better? Is there a filmography on the list? I'm not sure.
Somebody might know, but I suppose so. It just it was something I hadn't done before. It was somebody gave me the. Originally, I was sent the manuscript of the book before it came out, and then it got lost. And I think Robert Redford was going to make it for a while. He owned it anyway. And then suddenly, about 2 or 3 years after that, Elliot Kastner gave me the book. And I always remember, because on the front cover of the book it said, Raymond Chandler meets the Exorcist.
That's perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's such a great line. And I thought, oh, that sounds good. I might do that. So that's the reason, really. And
so you actually wrote the script, obviously based on the book, but it's quite a major departure from the book, isn't it? In terms of the setting and I think you put it maybe about 5 years earlier, and the characters are very different. It's very much your script at the end of the day, isn't it?
Well, I did.
Your story.
I changed it quite a lot. Yeah, I mean, and in the end, the book is the beginnings of everything, and I sort of went off on this, journey really because of being influenced by it. The heart of the piece, everything is the heart of the book. There's no doubt about that. It was the milieu and everything that I changed really, and obviously and all the dialogue and everything is mine. But it was really it was called Falling Angel, the book by William Hawksberg. Very intriguing book, and when I finished the screenplay, I changed it to Angel Heart because for just selfish reasons, just to make it mine.
And the book's completely New York, isn't it? And whereas you incorporated New Orleans.
I moved it to New Orleans. Yeah, I mean, he originally thought. I talked to Hawksberg before I started, and he had thought about. The book is basically New York, and I moved it to New Orleans because there were lots of clues about New Orleans in the original, and so I thought, well, I'll move the whole thing there. Also, I didn't want to make another New York movie, so I did shoot a part of it, but the early part was shot in New York, and then we moved to New Orleans, and it was just that much more interesting. And when I was writing the screenplay, I went down there and I would sit in. It was quite interesting, really, because I'd already, the thing about writing screenplays, anybody who's written screenplays, that if you've broken the back a bit, you know what you're doing, then you can write it anywhere, really. You have to be completely concentrated to write the original. But actually, I sat in the corner of bars in New Orleans and would listen to dialogue and stuff and add it to the screenplay. And then the screenplay developed from there. And it was it's an organic process.
And as I understand it, you had about 3 or 4 people in mind for the main role, one of whom was like Jack Nicholson, who you spoke to, and then Mickey Rourke was the person you ended up with.
I did, yeah. Well, my original idea was Nicholson to play Harry Angel and Marlon Brando to be the devil. That was the sort of, you think, when someone said, what's your ideal? And so I went to see Jack at his house in Los Angeles, and he'd just bought a hugely expensive impressionist painting at Sotheby's or somebody, and he'd bought the wrong painting. and he said, oh, and he had a catalogue, and 2 pages had stuck together, and he'd paid like $2 million for the wrong painting, and I said, oh, sorry, I've got you at a bad time. So he wasn't very interested in talking about my script. So we moved on.
And for Mickey Rourke, actually, this is a really big break for him.
Well, originally, I wanted... Mickey was like 4th. I asked De Niro I asked to be Harry Angel, and he didn't want it, and he said, I'd prefer to be the devil.
But actually, I mean, you say that, but actually it took about 6 months to get to the point where De Niro agreed,
doesn't
it?
A lot of lunches, a lot of dinners and things. And even then, we didn't know. We were starting filming in like 5 weeks' time, and he still hadn't really committed. And then I got a note from him saying, I'm of a mind to do it. So we thought, well, I don't know if that's
as good as you're going to get.
That's all you ever get from him, yeah.
And then, but in the end, Mickey Rourke was who you went with.
Yeah, Mickey said, "Don't talk to all these other people; they're no good." I said, "Brando, no; Nicholson, no; De Niro, no." He said, "I'm best." He was quite confident.
Would you say that because those scenes with De Niro and Rourke on screen together are pretty electric? And would you say actually that kind of Mickey's game was raised by being with De Niro?
Very much so. Well, both actually, because De Niro was obviously the more experienced. And what I did was, I rehearsed with almost every other scene that was involved with Mickey, because it's hard to rehearse with Mickey because everything he does is kind of improvised, and then the trick is to bring him back to what the original script is, and he does that, and he does it really well. And with De Niro said, "Can we have 2 cameras?" So you got 2 cameras so that both of them are being filmed at the same time, which is not very film, it's very television.
Yeah.
And it means you have to compromise the light a bit, but it meant that if one went off on a tangent, then the other would follow, and it's all being filmed. And so I had 2 cameras on the first scene, which was in Harlem, I remember, and it was they improvised, the 2 of them. It was not like an acting, it was like a boxing match. And they went off on a set. I thought, this is nothing to do with the script I'd written. and so I kept asking them to come back to what I'd done, and they did. But they were just testing one another really, and it's quite interesting because I remember that Mickey had in his hand he had like 2 cubes of ice throughout the whole, and he gradually was crushing it in his hand because it was dripping, and I don't know why he had the ice in his hand, but in every scene he did with De Niro, he had something in his hand. It was really strange. But
he did this thing, didn't he? Where didn't he bring like bits and pieces on set to kind of that he almost kind of created his character through, like, and didn't have like bits in his drawer that you had to kind of move around and stuff because they weren't period or.
Oh no, he always not. In performance, not really. I mean,
that was rehearsal, was it?
When I worked with him, before beginning it, he had some bloke make him a whole lot of suits, which cost a fortune. And they go, they're really great, Mickey, but they're a little bit of a problem is that they're 10 years the wrong period. He went, oh fine, okay, well we won't use those. And so there's another, quite a chunk of money, and everything he did, he would like to contribute, but if you threw it out, it didn't matter. He was quite good in that regard. Actually, De Niro was more difficult because De Niro phoned me and said, I want the guy to have different sticks, because one of the things that he'd decided on in the film, I don't know if you probably don't notice, but he has these false nails, and the nails get longer and longer every time you see De Niro in the film. And I remember the 3rd time he came, because he was not there a lot of the film, because it's quite a small part really. And on the 3rd time that he came, they said, De Niro wants you in his trailer, and because I said, I'm a bit busy, I'm shooting something else, and so no, he's getting really angry because you've not come to see him. So I said, are you okay? And he said, yeah. He said, you're not paying enough attention to me. And so I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Bob." I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's my nails." And he had this lady come in from Brighton Beach, and he'd found this lady, and she was there, and she was really nice, but she put on these false nails, and he said, "What do you think? Are they long enough?" And I said, "Well, how much have they grown since we last saw you?" He said, "Well, they're 1/8 of an inch longer." I said, "I don't think people are going to notice that." But he said, "It's important to me." So, you know, it's that kind of attention to detail. But before we started shooting, he said, "Alan, I'm in Paris." He said, "I'm in a place that sells the best walking sticks you could ever see." He said, "And I've been. They've got hundreds of them." And because he wanted to hold this walking stick, and we know there's one in the film that you see. But anyway, he said, "I've narrowed it down to 6 sticks." So I said, "Oh, that's good." I said, he said, "And I want to buy them. Well, I need your permission." I said, "Well, how much are they?" He said, "They're $30,000. So I said, "I'm going to send someone over with a Polaroid camera and take pictures of them, and then we'll decide on one of them," which we did. We decided on one stick, which was quite expensive, which we use in the film.
I mean, it's interesting what you were saying then about his fingers, because actually the nails are almost like a really vital part of his character, and he always seems to be very. A lot of his performance comes through his nails in a weird kind of way. And you know that when he's like holding the egg and stuff as well, he's rolling the egg, and I mean he definitely kind of goes to town.
The egg is the best scene for me. I love that scene because I wrote it and I like the writing of it, and he is fantastic in it because as he rolls the egg and cracks it, it's like cracking every bone in Mickey's body. It's quite powerful scene, and it's interesting in so much as we were doing this in this Italian restaurant in the Lower East Side, and I thought he was a bit over the top in it. So I said this terrible. I had an in-joke with the camera crew, which you must never do with someone like De Niro, because he doesn't like you to be separate from him. And so I said, "That's I forget." I went, "It's a bit over the," and I did it in front of the crew. So he called me to one side, and he said, "Don't do that in front of people." I said, "What?" He said, "You know, if I'm I'm overdoing it, just very quietly, say to me. I don't." It was his pride, I suppose, because he's one of the greatest actors ever. Let's face it. So I said, I tried to diffuse this quite awkward moment with him and me, because we'd gotten quite well up to that point. I said, "I'll do, the Long John Silver thing. Jim lad. That's a bit over the top. Jim lad." So I, because that's what I'd said. He said, "What does it mean? Jim lad." Because I'd said that. I said it to the camera operator. Jim lad. And I said, "Well, it's kind of British thing saying a little bit over the top, really." So he said, "Well, don't do that. Don't say Jim lad in front of people." So I said, I won't do that again." I said, I'll say Long John Silver, and that'll be our secret thing." And he went, "All right, say Long John Silver." "Don't do Jim lad." He said, "It's when you go like that." It's like,
one of the things, I guess, one of the kind of the arts to making a good kind of horror film or a good, I mean, this is a sort of, I guess it's a thriller with this sort of supernatural element to it, but it's kind of how much you kind of tease the audience. And I mean, I'm thinking in terms of, obviously you've got the sort of the motif with the fan every time somebody dies, and you've got that kind of the egg and the soul, but there's also even just things like Louis Cypher and whether people are going to pick up on the fact that it's Lucifer or not. And I wonder whether, is it quite a fine balance between deciding what you can kind of put into tease and what is going to kind of reveal your hand, I suppose?
I think the revelations were exactly as they were revealed in the book, but I'd written it differently, so I'd put myself into, you write it into a different place, and you write different characters. They create their own lives, really. But I think it was the detective story, the Raymond Chandler side, half of it, that interested me more than anything else. And I wanted it to be for real. I didn't really want it to be surreal or a horror movie. I never ever thought of it doing it that. I took it, I made it, as I made it, I thought those things would still be believable, as opposed to making something that was...
I mean, you obviously made a decision not to include like sort of big visual effects and so forth, which a lot of those kind of films can do sometimes. But one thing that you did do is you had the kind of the moment with the contact lenses, didn't you, with both De Niro and then the kind of the baby, or the contact, or the the eye thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems slightly out of keeping with the rest of the film in a way.
Probably.
Was that a big decision in terms?
Well, yeah. No, De Niro wanted. He had another lady came in from London with. He wanted his eyes to change towards the end, and he wanted to drop his hair. He had his hair in a bun to begin with. It was quite long, his hair, and at the time, and he wanted the final reveal, which was the most amazing scene I ever did with any actors. Was final scene with De Niro and Mickey, where Mickey is quite fantastic actually, and
his voice is going really
hoarse. And we did it a number of times. That's why his voice is kind of hoarse. But it was like he said, "I'm going to beat him this time," and it was like another bout. It was like a boxing match, and he is, whether it's a good, bad, or indifferent scene, he is quite wonderful in it actually. And De Niro was amazed at how good he was. In fact, he said to me afterwards, "He's really good, this boy."
And how surprised were you by the fact that you cast Lisa Bonet in the film, but there was a massive amount of publicity about the fact that you had Lisa Bonet, the kind of child from the Cosby Show, in this kind of sex scene with all the blood and everything as well, and there was a big media focus before the film came out about that, wasn't there?
There was, yeah. I mean, I'd never seen the Cosby Show at that moment in time, so I didn't really know anything about her being this, she was
sweetheart of America.
She came in as an actress, really, and she was pretty amazing. And she was, when we did the sex scenes, believe me, she was infinitely more confident than Mickey.
And when shooting a scene like that, which obviously is an intimate scene, but then suddenly has got all this kind of this blood being kind of chucked around as well. I mean, how was that just from a practical point of view, from the sort of the crew point of view?
Well, it's two problems you have. Is that first of all, you're doing a sex scene, so you try and minimise the crew anyway. We were in a small location. Which was a beautiful house on, I forget which street it was, but right in the middle of the old French Quarter. Lovely old house that hadn't been touched for a long time. And we were in this quite small area of it. And so the crew are out on the balcony, mostly. So you're doing a sex scene to start with. So that's the two actors, the cinematographer, the camera operator, camera assistant, and me. To do that, and then I had rigged the whole thing to rain blood, basically, and I didn't tell anyone, but I should have. And then we did the sex scene, which is hard enough to do anyway. All sex scenes are sort of awkward to do, and we did that, and then I said I'm going to do a few more takes, and then I gave the nod to the special effects guy, and suddenly there they are making love, and it's pouring with rain. Mickey and Lisa Bonet absolutely didn't notice. It's quite extraordinary, really. But the worst thing was the camera assistant, who said he's worried about his camera, and he's trying to put bits of plastic over it. And he said to the camera assistant, he said, "Did you know it was going to rain blood?" And he said, no, Alan didn't tell me. And you think that you're taken by surprise, but of course it's about the actors being taken by surprise, and actually the fundamental rule always in film is that the crew should never be taken by surprise. Not really, no. It was pretty close to how I'd written it. It was all shot on location, everything. There was no sets at all, actually. We did do a whole lot of stuff which was meant to be in hell, and I shot this ludicrous scenes which were just so silly, really, which was meant to be, just hell. and of ludicrous sexual debauchery. It was like a poor man's Ken Russell movie. Yeah, well, you do. I mean, when you do I did an enormous amount of research for the film, based on, a lot of photography. It's from one photograph I can write an entire scene, and probably the scene with Mickey with the sign which says "Colours" at the back. You see that photograph, and then automatically I wanted to write something that was based on that. So I think that, very much. Yeah, I think that if you're doing a period piece, the best thing always when you're writing is do as much research as you can. Really, I find photographic research as important as any other kind of research, personally. And as I say, I've written so many scenes over the years based on one photograph. I did that on Mississippi Burning, and I did that on this film, and in Come See the Paradise in particular. But a photograph is the thing that period photograph can do so much for me. Yeah, very good point, really, because I did the stuff with Brown and McGee. For instance, we recorded all that whilst we were in New Orleans, and all of the in situ kind of music, obviously, we recorded down there. Originally, and then I'd ask Trevor Jones, who did a really great job, and then one of the nice things was to have Courtney Pine, who does the sax solos in the film, which was, and Courtney, we were here when we finished the film, we were at a recording studio here in Islington, and he would play to the screen, which was amazing. It was a bit like a pianist playing to a silent movie, and he had the basic themes which Trevor had given him, but he improvised on that with the sax, which was pretty great. I'd never done that before, and it was actually quite a good exercise. The interesting thing is that Trevor was not the first choice, as he knows, is that I asked Ennio Morricone to do the music, and I went to Rome and showed him the film, and he pretended that he couldn't speak English. and his manager said, the maestro, and I thought he was talking about me, but apparently he was talking about it was Ennio he was talking about. And he said, he likes your film very much, but there's no work for him to do. I said, no, there's loads of it. He said, no, he would like to write all the, next time come to him earlier, and he'll write all that jazz stuff for you. So I thought, well, you'd be hard pressed to write better than Brownie McGee, Well, I think, you look at all the old Raymond Chandler black and white movies, really, but the cinematographer Michael Saracen and I are very much influenced by photography of the period, really. I suppose that really dictated it. The interesting thing is that we went to great trouble. I didn't actually see the film tonight, so I don't know what print you saw, but we tried to desaturate the colours, which at the time we made it was really quite difficult to do, which was done in the laboratory. Now, from a digital point of view, you just twist a knob and it's done. But at that time, it was about keeping silver retention into the print in order to make it look the way it did. But I think it's an extension of the photography that we'd done before with Michael Saracen, and I think when I wrote the piece, I did an enormous amount of research, and I had thousands of photographs, really, and so we had all over on every wall in a production office, which really, it was those old black and white photos that influenced everything that was visual about the film. When I was writing the screenplay, as I mentioned earlier, I did go to New Orleans, and I was sitting in corners of bars and things, which is when I first saw the fan, really. And this, I was in a bar, and it was backlit, and it very strongly backlit, and as the fan went round, there was a bloke who was sitting there having a drink at the end of the bar, and it was like a huge big sword, like a scimitar, that was sort of cutting his head off. And I just thought it was a great image, which is, I then used that as a portent of death, really, in the whole of the film. But that image came from just sitting there in a bar in New Orleans and seeing something visually interesting that we then replicated that.
Micro-budget Studios brings you a new concept in movie watching on the small screen, containing some of the world's most interesting films by cinema's biggest talent, which will be shown and added to on a monthly basis. As a subscriber, you will be able to receive free stuff and learn from the various tutorials and equipment reviews that will be uploaded at Dragon.
Wow!